On the debt restructuring, the first most important thing that we will experience is the sovereign upgrade. Minimum one-notch upgrade, like 2 or 3%, would be expected in 2 to 3 weeks from the exchange, bond exchange. So that will change a lot of things for the banking sector as well. Because when the default happened, if you recall, a lot of the agencies, a lot of the banks moved away from confirming LCs or doing trade with Sri Lanka. Even some of the agencies who did risk participation in Sri Lanka moved away, sadly. And we had to work on different other methods to import products, goods. The other thing that we saw is, of course, few banks participated, but the RWAs and the ECLs are very high when you do a transaction in Sri Lanka. So the pricing was very high. So as a result of that, the trade got restricted and entire trade cycle kind of got into a cash cycle. The borrowers or the traders learned to borrow, import on cash or on a confirmed LC that is very costly. So those dynamics will change. The importers will be able to move into a simple LC without a confirmation. At least the confirmation fees will come down. That's a significant impact. If you move away from confirmation, or certain suppliers will completely move away from LC for Sri Lanka when you come out of default and move into a more DA, DP type terms or even open account. So you will see more goods coming into the country. There'll be pressure on the rupee at that point. Initially, we expect some kind of a stronger rupee. When the debt restructuring is over, that's something that you can experience for a couple of months. But immediately you see the import bill going up. So for the overall business community, it will be a very big positive, because if you look at the GDP of Sri Lanka, 60% of the GDP is in the service sector. And in the service sector, you have a larger FMCG component, logistics component. It's a consumption-based economy, and we love to consume. So the growth will come with things opening up. The other thing about the upgrade is, like we've seen very rarely, markets like Ecuador suddenly, from default to B minus, kind of an upgrade for Sri Lanka. Again, on the global context, when you look at some of the markets data that Murthy also mentioned about the historic defaults, generally we see like a 18 months average for a market to get a B minus or a B, generally. Sri Lanka, can you get a B in 18 months? I wouldn't know. Might take slightly longer. But you can access the market if you want. Of course, we have the GFN targets and IMF guidelines and all of that. But overall, it will be a very good position. Minimum CCC and upwards, it will get, once you start to go up, it will go up really quickly to a certain level. So that will be a very big positive. Now, to the banking sector, again, one is all these fee structures. Second, most important thing is, with this large exposure policy coming our way, in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll have to make sure we have enough capital, because the single borrower limit will be 25% of the tier 1. And we all know where our tier 1 capital is as a sector. We also have a lot of tier 2 capital. And sector has not gone into the international markets in the last 3 years. It was all borrowed domestically, or collected domestically. So the sector will be able to go to the international markets and raise funds, bring capital into the system. We also have 3 years to be compliant, but a lot of work to be done in terms of being ready, because for some of the banks, you see the SBL coming down by 30 to 40% because of this large exposure policy. So we have to be ready. So for that also, I think this opening up and the rating upgrade will be critical. Now, coming back to the IMF program, good, bad, ugly, are we happy, not happy? The reality is we have to stay in the program, right? The benefit of it, the investors have put money and they're going to get into restructuring very soon. I don't want to go into the details of restructuring. We have to get it right for the first time. Because multiple countries have gone into, like Murtaza said, into multiple restructuring, so getting it right for the first time would be critical. But looking at the program and looking at the history, like especially LATAM, now again, Asia, only Korea defaulted and came out, never went to IMF, never defaulted. India had a BOP crisis, never went to default, but they had a very severe crisis and never went to IMF after that. So there are good examples on the Asia side, but if you look at LATAM, you see countries continuously going, like Argentina is a classic example. There is Venezuela, there is Ecuador. When you look at these markets carefully, you will see Venezuela as one of the largest oil providers, suppliers. Still, they went into multiple defaults, more for geopolitical issue. Now, LATAM, Argentina is a classic example of how we can relate a little bit, moving away from policies and moving away from the path continuously with political change. So that's something that we should not do. So staying on course, staying with the IMF would be critical. Now the real challenge is the IMF forecasted growth at 3%. Is it enough? Is another conversation that we need to have. Should we look at 4 to 5%? Then how should we look at it? Are we trying to stimulate the economy again by fiscal stimulus? It will be not very healthy. So productivity in the private sector would be critical. Those are areas for us to look at. But specifically on the IMF program, on the growth aspect, I think we need to sit and discuss in terms of where the growth would come from. At least by end of this year, hopefully debt restructuring is over. Fiscal will hopefully improve a little bit from where we are. We need to seriously look at where the growth is coming from, and we might have to look at targeted stimulus. I'm not talking about giving incentives to everybody, but targeted incentives for growth sectors would be critical. Now, that's a negotiation we will have to do. Now, we all agree that there's a massive brain drain in the country. I don't have to explain the numbers. It's a staggering number. Banking industry has lost thousands of people. In every industry, losing people. Can you go on like that for another 2 years? I don't think so. So then how do you retain that talent? So they would like to see the growth. They would like to see employee creation. They would like to, especially the lower end of the, the executive cadre, they are, really suffering with taxes and the inflation that they have gone through in the last 2 years. Of course, now it's single digit, but point to point, see the prices at the same level. So something for us to think about, because if we lose our skill set, and if the growth doesn't come in, as an emerging market, we have to grow at least by 4 to 5%. I think going beyond 5% with the current economic model will be very, very difficult for Sri Lanka anyway. But at least hitting those 4.5%, 5% numbers would be critical for Sri Lanka. So something for policymakers to sit and understand where can we, stimulate a little bit and get the growth in would be critical for any government. Of course, the political risk is on our way because there's an election. So our ask is to stay in the program. We are, I think, agreeable for the larger part of the program. But on certain things, we should be open-minded to negotiate every 6 months. The negotiation, discussion, review would be critical. We can't simply implement things, and we can't expect the revenues to go up simply by increasing the VAT to 18% on every possible product. It doesn't work. Even the employee taxes and things like that, even corporate taxes for the FDIs, the inflows coming into the country. New companies will look at the opportunities in other markets as well, because you're competing with other emerging markets. So we should not think that companies will come with all the conditions that we have. So some of those things that we have to carefully consider, but not to go back to the old ways of doing things, of course. It should be data-driven, carefully thought through. It should not be like because a couple of people are complaining, particular business community is complaining, and we should now to give us stimulus package for that community and don't track at all. That's what we've done in the past. And we given stimulus, fiscal, we've given subsidies for everybody. Myself, I've enjoyed subsidies. So we should never get to that.